welcome back to When Jillian Speaks, and this is the Heart to Heart Monday. So, this is our special weekly series where we have honest conversations about love, relationships, healing, self-worth, and the emotional experiences that many people carry quietly in their hearts. So, if you're new here, thanks for joining us, and let me remind you that this is a voice podcast dedicated to real conversations about love and life. So this is not a place for perfect answers or fairy tale expectations, but it is a space where we talk about realities of relationships, beautiful moments, painful lessons, healing journeys, and everything in between. So whether you're listening right now, whenever you are, while you're driving, folding your laundry, sitting on your balcony with a cup of tea or coffee, taking a walk, or simply needing a quiet voice to keep you company today, I'm grateful that you are here. So today's Heart to Heart Monday episode is called Why Good People Stay in Relationships That Hurt Them. And now before we begin, I want to say something important, okay? This episode is not about judging anyone, not about telling people they should have left sooner. Okay? It's not about blaming people for staying. Because if you have ever loved someone deeply, you already know that the relationships are rarely as simple as outsiders think they are. Okay, so people can often look at the painful relationship and ask, like, why didn't they leave? Right? But very few people ask, like, what made them stay? And that's what we're talking about today, because understanding that question can change the way we view ourselves and others. So let's talk. On our first segment is about a question of, have you ever stayed longer than you should have? I want you to think that question for a moment. And have you ever stayed somewhere longer than you should have? Like maybe it was a relationship, it was a friendship, maybe it was a job, or maybe it was a situation that you knew wasn't healthy anymore. Yet somehow you stayed. Not because of suffering and you're enjoying them, not because you were weak, but because leaving felt harder than staying. And I think many of us have experienced that in one form or another. And when it comes to relationship, the emotional stakes are even higher. Because relationships involves memories, the attachment, the history, your shared dreams, the promises to love. And when love is involved, decisions become complicated. Very complicated. On our next segment is good people often stay because they see the best in others. And one thing I've noticed throughout life is that good-hearted people often see the potential before they see the reality. They see the best in others. They believe people can grow. They believe people can change. They even believe difficult seasons eventually pass. And to be honest, those qualities are really beautiful. And the world needs more compassionate people. We need more forgiving people. We need more understanding people. But sometimes those same beautiful qualities can become painful when they're not balanced with healthy boundaries. Because there comes to a point when believing in someone's potential starts costing you and your peace. All right? And that's the difficult truth. And you're going to start saying things like, I know they're struggling. I know they didn't mean it. Or I know they had a beautiful, difficult childhood. Or I know they've been under pressure. You know, and while all of those things may be true, they don't automatically erase the hurt being caused. Understanding someone's pain does not mean accepting ongoing pain for them. And I think that's something many people need to hear. So, next segment is about the trap of waiting for things to change. Okay. Let's talk about hope, because hope keeps many relationships alive. Someone hope is wonderful. Someone hope is saving relationships, but sometimes hope becomes a waiting room as well. A waiting room where people spend months, years, decades, waiting for change, the effort, consistency, apologies, or commitment, or waiting for someone to become who they promised they would be. Right? And little by little, life passes by. I remember hearing someone says that I wasn't in love with who they were. I was in love with who I believed they could become. And that statement stayed with me, because so many people aren't actually holding on to the reality. They're holding on the possibility, the potential, the promises. And while potential is inspiring, relationships are built on reality, not possibility, not maybe, not someday. Reality. And how is this person treating you today? Like, how do they make you feel today? Are they showing up today? These questions matter. And next segment is about the fear nobody talks about. So let's be honest with this. Sometimes people stay because they're afraid. They're not weak, not foolish, they're afraid. And the fear that has many different voices. Sometimes fear says, hey, what if I never find someone else again? And sometimes fear would say, what if I regret leaving? Or other way, some fear would say, what if they're my only chance at love? And perhaps the one of the saddest fears of all is the question of like, what if this is the best I can do? And the last one that truly breaks my heart, because so many wonderful people secretly believe they should be grateful for crumbs, grateful for inconsistent effort, grateful for occasional affection, for basic effort, basic respect. But respect isn't a bonus, it's a requirement. Kindness isn't a luxury. A requirement. Emotional safety isn't a reward, it's a requirement. And when someone's self-worth has been worn down long enough, they begin accepting less than they deserve. And because they want less, not because they do that, but because they stop believing more possible. And on our next segment is about the story that we tell ourselves. Sometimes the relationship isn't the only thing keeping us stuck. Sometimes it's the only story we've created around it. The story sounds something like this. If I love them enough, they'll change. Or it sounds like if I stay patient, things will improve. If I keep trying, eventually they'll understand. All right, so for some people, these stories continue for years. Now, don't misunderstand me. People absolutely can change. Relationship absolutely can heal. Like, growth absolutely happens. But healthy change requires participation from both people. One person cannot carry an entire relationship forever. Eventually, exhaustion arrives. And when exhaustion arrives, love starts feeling heavy. Love starts feeling like work. It starts feeling like responsibility instead of connection. And that's often when people realize something isn't right. In the next episode, we talk about next segment, we'll talk about the is when love starts costing you yourself. And this is where I want us to pause and reflect. Have you ever been in a relationship where you slowly stopped being yourself? Maybe you became quieter, or maybe you stopped expressing your opinions, or maybe you started walking on eggshells. Maybe you constantly monitored your words to avoid conflict. Like maybe you gave up hobbies, friendships, dreams, goals, without even realizing those. Sometimes unhealthy relationships don't break us dramatically, because sometimes they shrink us gradually, sometimes gradually that we barely notice. Until one day we'll look in the mirror and wonder, like, who am I now? Like, where did that confident version of me went? And where did it go? Like, where did that joyful version of me go? Like, where did that hopeful version of me go? And a healthy relationship should support your growth, not require your disappearance. But we wanted to talk about this conversation about the difference between love and attachment. Because many people mistake attachment for love. Attachment says always, I need you. Love says, I choose you. When attachment says, I can't survive without you. And love says, my life is better with you, but I still don't know who I am, but I still know who I am. Attachment often comes from fear, and love coming from security. Right? So attachment creates panic at the thought of leaving, when love creates peace during difficult conversations. Sometimes people stay because they love. Sometimes people stay because they're terrified of what life looks like without that person. And those are two very different things. If you're listening today, you're currently in a relationship that feels confusing, painful, exhausting, or emotionally draining, I want you to speak directly. I want to speak with you directly for a moment. You don't have to make any major decisions today. You don't have to figure out your entire future today. But what you can do is begin by being honest with yourself. Like, ask yourself, like, am I happy? Do you feel respected? Like, do you feel safe expressing yourself? Do you feel valued? Or do I feel valued? Ask yourself that. Do I feel love in a way that brings peace rather than constant anxiety? Why? Why do you have the questions to ask yourself? Because that questions matters. And your answers matter too. Because your feelings are information. They deserve the attention, they deserve the honesty, and they deserve the compassion. So before we finish our episode tonight or today, I'd like you to think about a final question. If someone you deeply loved came to you and described their relationship exactly as it is today, what advice would you give them? Would you tell them to keep sacrificing themselves? Would you tell them to keep accepting the behavior that hurts them? Or would you tell them they're better? They deserve better. Sometimes the advice we freely give to others is the advice that we most need to hear ourselves, right? And that's true. It happens to me. I would say I'm just a very good advisor, but there are moments that it's so hard for me to take my own advice for myself that I give to others, right? It happens because we're human. And maybe perhaps that's something worth reflecting on this week. All right, so everyone, thank you so much for joining me for today's Heart to Heart Monday episode. I do hope that this conversation reminded you that staying in a painful relationship doesn't make someone weak. Okay? And living does not make someone selfish. Every situation is different. Every story is different. But one thing remains true. You deserve respect. You deserve kindness. You deserve emotional safety. And you deserve a relationship where love helps you grow rather than slowly diminish who you are. And if today's episode resonated with you, please consider sharing it with someone who you think may need to hear it. And you can listen on When Jillian Speaks on YouTube, Spotify, and of course on Amazon Music. And if you have a personal story that you'd like to share, our anonymous story submission forms can be found on our Facebook page and on Instagram account. And your experience may help another listener feel seen, understood, and less alone. And you can also support my podcast for grabbing a copy of my book. It's called The Space I Never Gave Myself, and it's available on Amazon.com and also through our website, whenjillianspeaks.com.au. Thank you very much again one more time for spending part of your day with me. As I always say, take care of your heart, be kind to yourself, and remember, healing doesn't always happen in one giant step. Sometimes it happens in the small choices that we make every day. Once again, this is Jillian, and you've been listening to When Jillian Speaks. I'll see you again on the next Heart to Heart Monday.